YouTube, so today we're going to be growing strawberries, dahlias, and basil, all which I'm super excited about, so let's get growing. Okay, so I'm going to start the strawberries in one of these strawberry containers. This is one of the garden hacks that I actually really like. So I'm starting to run out of the starters, so I'm just going to use this. The strawberry seeds are kind of what you would see on the berry. They're quite small. Ooh, see, they're in here. And that's why I like using a container like this, because you can just sprinkle them on top and you don't have to be as specific as when you're using the cells. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle about, I bought 25, and I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle about half of them onto the soil. And this is one of my favorite crops. I wouldn't mind if all of my raised beds were entirely filled with strawberries. So I don't mind if I get a lot of these, and then I'll show you how I go ahead and transplant them later into like a 3-inch pot, okay? So that's all you have to do. Go ahead and cover it with compost. And then remember that if you're using one of these trays, like one of these berry trays, you would not, because we're in a tropical area and it's so hot already, you wouldn't go ahead and cover it. You would do that if you were somewhere in a cooler climate and you're actively trying to create heat. We're not really trying to create heat. The reason I like this hack is because these are nice and deep like these are. And really what you want whenever you have something where you're starting seeds in is to give them like space for the roots to grow. So the next thing we're gonna start is basil. So unlike the strawberries, where I would be happy if every single one of my raised beds was filled with strawberries, as far as the basil plants go, I would be happy with 2 plants because they actually do get quite large, and I can't use all the basil that would come from more than 2 of those plants. So I'm going to go ahead and plant it up in one of these trays, and then really all that'll end up in my raised bed is like 2 of the plants. Okay, so in terms of the basil, the one that I am using is a Thai basil, and one of the things that happens when I'm selecting seeds that you may want to incorporate as well if you're in a hot region is to always buy an Asian variety of seeds. So this is Thai basil. So the leaves are much smaller than the Italian basil that you think of. And these are a ton of seeds. So I only need 1 seed in each cell tray, or I try to, and then cover it with compost, and that is good for later. That is good to water in, and that'll be great. So then the next thing we're gonna start are dahlias, and I am really excited about dahlias. I have tried to grow dahlias before from tubers. Dahlias, I think, are such a pretty flower, so I'm really excited about this, but the reason I'm doing it from seeds this time is because I couldn't get them to grow from tubers, and I do think they're a little bit temperamental when it comes to specifically South Florida. When I've gone to the Disney Garden and Flower Festival, they have them there quite regularly, but I never see them in South Florida. So in order to not spend money on tubers, to then just kind of see whether it happens or not, I've decided to buy some seeds and see if this happens. This is just a low-cost way of seeing if I can get some pretty flowers in the garden. One of the things I have realized is that some zinnias really end up looking very similar to dahlias. So and those are easy to grow. So if I cannot get these growing, this is what the seed looks like. If I cannot get these growing, I'll probably just stick to zinnias. So then, okay, so then today I have not forgotten labels, so let's go ahead and label everything so that we know exactly what we're growing. So these are dahlias. These are basil. And the strawberry container has strawberries. So the next thing I'm gonna do with you is, as you might be able to see, my orchids are doing really well right now, and I have a few orchids that I would like to repot here with you. Orchids, like, this is a good time for orchids, but when you buy them from like the grocery store, they usually come in a container like this, which doesn't really have too many holes. They do come in bark, which is a good thing. They don't come in dirt. But we can do a little bit better. So this is in general just a good time for orchids. Your orchids should typically bloom about once a year. I have had a lot of people be like, oh, my orchid died. Are you interested? Can you revive it? They're not really dead. They just bloom once a year. So once they're done blooming, you just kind of have to hold on to them and keep treating them well until the upcoming year, and at which time they'll bloom again. So let's get to repotting. Here we go. So an orchid pot should look like this. Like, it should have a ton of holes. And the reason is that the roots need a lot of space to breathe. My orchids, I barely water them. I want to say I water them like once a month. So, but they are sitting here where they get just shade. So in my backyard, they're getting indirect light. They're in this patio. And basically, I would say they're living off of like the humidity in the air. And they're doing just fine. And they bloom at least once a year, if not more. So I've never taken the time to count, but they bloom quite regularly. So a friend of mine just bought these, and I'm gonna go ahead and repot it for her. Okay. So you would just buy some orchid bark, which just looks like this. And you do need the orchid bark. You would never, ever, ever put an orchid in soil. That just wouldn't work. What orchids will usually come in is a mixture of bark and moss. I like that it comes in moss, because if you're gonna treat your orchids like I do, which is you put them outside and you just survival of the fittest, I like the moss because it holds on to water for them just a little bit longer. So I would go ahead and leave it. And then you just place it in your pot. And go ahead and place your bark around it until it fills in. All right, so that's one orchid done. Isn't it pretty? Okay, so I do want to go through a quick recap with you as to how all the vegetables that we've planted before are doing, okay? All the squashes and cucumbers are here, along with a few other things, and they're all doing well. I checked them today to see if I could see the roots coming out of the bottom, and you really can't quite yet. So even though, look at how they're spilling over, I still need to do a little bit more prep in the garden area where I plan on putting these. So they're all just doing fine. One of the things I did want to show you is look at the cuttings of the Cuban oregano. It's coming along. And I took a few more cuttings because I really do want like 10 plants, and everything is looking fine. So like, if you think about it, like when you have a plant and you just cut some of it off, it dies rather quickly, but you can see how we did a cutting, we did it right here, and everything's doing well. So let's go over some of the veggies that are a little bit on the smaller side that we've planted together. So what do we have here? This is the butterhead lettuce. So look at how we planted this 2 weeks ago, and it's already looking quite good. I don't see any roots coming out of the bottom, but we have some germination and everything's looking good. So here's the arugula, also looking good. So again, not coming out of the bottom quite yet, not big enough to be transplanted, but everything's going well. I think hopefully in our next video, we'll be able to move those along. These are the peppers. Am I correct? Yes, these are the sweet peppers that we planted together. This is getting quite large, and look, you can just see the beginnings of some roots at the bottom. Usually when something is ready to be moved on, the root system is quite robust. I think that if we were to take this one out at this point, it would like the dirt itself would fall apart. So I don't think it's quite ready yet. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the chard. So the chard does have roots coming out of the bottom, but as you can see, it's quite wilty, which I do think is pretty normal for chard. I did look it up, and it said that if you are in hot weather, that chard seedlings will droop like this. So I think that's essentially what we're looking at. I may have started them too early. So I think if you're planting along with me or just giving it a shot, I would go ahead and maybe start them now. I started this about a month ago, and look at how they're doing. They're still fine. I will still pot them on, and they will still make it into the vegetable garden, and everything will be fine. But I do think it's important to look at the plant and see how it's doing so that you can just kind of decide what you're going to do for next time. So that's how everything's looking. So if you're enjoying this and want to see how our seedlings did today, go ahead, like and subscribe so that YouTube notifies you when the next video comes out. Okay, bye.